What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Monday, everybody. I hope you're all having a lovely start to a new week. Just a few hours ago, Hong Kong's controversial leader, Carrie Lam, announced that she will not be seeking a second term as chief executive of the Special Administrative Region. This is a very interesting development, which we will be exploring more in detail in tomorrow's episode. For today, though, let's begin with Shanghai. For almost all of the financial megacity's 26 million residents under varying degrees of lockdown and officially recognized new cases in the city approaching 10,000 by the day, the situation for the Yangtze River Delta metropolis continues to worsen as we move into this week. The eastern half of Shanghai remains under tight movement restrictions despite the official end of a 4-day lockdown last Friday. Puxi, the larger western part of the city, should expect similar treatment after its lockdown officially ends too. On Saturday, Vice Premier Sun Chunlan was sent to Shanghai by the central government and urged the city's authorities to, quote, make resolute and swift moves, end quote, to deal with the situation. Yesterday, Sunday, in the evening, it was confirmed that the central government has deployed the People's Liberation Army, China's military, or more specifically the party's military, to Shanghai and boosted the city with an additional several thousand healthcare workers. Most of the army deployment was of medical personnel recruited from across the Army, Navy, and Joint Logistics Support Forces, as well as general service personnel. We are now seeing more personnel deployed to Shanghai than we did at the height of the incredibly strict Wuhan lockdown in 2020. Despite this, however, Chinese media outlet Caixin writes that local community workers have told their reporters that Shanghai still has quote-unquote serious manpower shortages. The speed of the spread has taken local authorities by surprise. The chief epidemiologist of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention over the weekend expressed to the country that the BA.1 Omicron variant spreads more than 70% faster than the Delta strain, and BA.2 spreads more than 60% faster than BA.1. Zheng Wenhong, an influential infectious disease specialist, explains that one person with BA.2 in Shanghai can infect an average of 9.5 people after an infection. This number was only 2.5 to 3 people for the original COVID-19 authorities confronted in Wuhan back in early 2020. Much of China's COVID policy was informed from its experience with the Wuhan outbreak, but this variant is a very different beast, and with small outbreaks of Delta last year, this should have been apparent. The economic and social toll of the week-long lockdown is beginning to be acutely felt by the relatively wealthy and cosmopolitan urban middle-class dominated Shanghainese population. Residents are increasingly complaining of crowded and unsanitary central quarantine facilities, as well as difficulties in securing food supplies and essential medical help. Shanghai health authorities have also come under fire in recent days for separating infant COVID-19 patients from their parents. Videos of the children and harsh criticism against the measures were trending on the Chinese internet over the weekend. The local government regulations being criticized require adult patients with mild symptoms to be treated at makeshift facilities, while children must be hospitalized at a clinic center. Unlike with other massive lockdowns in lower-tier cities, Shanghai is home to the business elite, the intelligentsia, and other important public figures in the country. As such, government moves are under a far greater degree of scrutiny than we've seen in the past. And in what we can consider a red flag, Chinese media is now starting to admit that Shanghai may not be able to stamp out all the cases, in which case policymakers have a tough question to answer. What do we do now? We will continue following the lockdown, not just in Shanghai, but with other outbreaks across the country, including the increasingly large economic cost as we go through this week. Chinese stocks have seen their worst performance in a quarter for years. We shouldn't be surprised to hear this, though we followed the most recent bloodbath in the markets a few weeks ago. The China Securities Index, which consists of the largest companies listed in the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges, lost nearly 15% of its value in the 3 months to March 31st of this year, while the 500 stock strong Shenzhen index dropped 18%. The Wall Street Journal points out that for both benchmarks, this was the biggest quarterly decline in percentage terms since the third quarter of 2015. Interestingly, it was 2015 when China saw its last major crisis in its property sector. The Shanghai Composite Index, which has more large and less volatile state-owned companies, fell about 11%, its worst performance since the fourth quarter of 2018. Speaking of Chinese stocks, of course, investors' eyes are on the talks between the United States and Chinese regulators on the future of Chinese stocks on US exchanges. Chinese state media and authorities have expressed optimism that a deal to keep Chinese companies in US capital markets will be reached. I myself am not as optimistic, but we will see. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content, it's always a huge help if you hit the like button. Just a quick reminder, just hit that like button below the video and it really helps a small channel. If you're watching this for the first time and you're getting some value from this sort of analysis, I release one of these videos every day. So if you want to be on top of this sort of stuff in the future, click subscribe and the bell notification. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile, links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee are below. As always, thank you everybody for your ongoing support. International investment bank Citi has revised up its 2022 GDP growth forecast for China from 4.7% to 5%. We remember that China's official growth target this year is 5.5%. Now, some of you may be wondering, wait a minute, China's property sector continues to go through a painful decline. The country is wrestling with economically devastating lockdowns, and the capital markets are freaking out, not to mention the geopolitical complications in Europe and elsewhere. Why is Citibank revising up its forecast for GDP? Well, that's the very reason. The bank's analysts are anticipating that the economic headwinds are so strong that it will push nervous policymakers in Beijing to expand its surge in infrastructure spending this year. That is, GDP slowdown in this case is a sign of future GDP growth, as it will provoke a very strong fiscal response. This is what we have discussed on here before, and in fact I've predicted that GDP growth will likely get close to that 5.5% target. The question is though, is this good for the economy? Well, if you can afford it, a surge in infrastructure spending can stabilize your economy in the short term. However, the spending is only good for the economy in the long term if the infrastructure projects result in strong productivity gains. Otherwise, you are simply increasing debt and reducing the effectiveness of similar fiscal measures in the future. As we've discussed many times in previous videos, productivity gains from infrastructure spending has dropped to almost zero in many parts of the country. If a surge in infrastructure spending is adopted in an attempt to reverse structural decline, then it's even worse, because you are just wasting resources and capital to simply postpone the inevitable. So for China, the question is not whether there will be growth or not. The better question is how much of the growth will be healthy, sustainable growth, and how much will not be. With all the issues China is experiencing currently, and the likely strong fiscal response we're going to see from Beijing in the coming months, it seems that much of this year's growth for China will be the latter. And just a quick Evergrande update before we finish. A unit of crisis-hit property developer China Evergrande Group said construction work has resumed at 95% of Evergrande's projects across the country as of late March. According to the unit, if you believe them, Evergrande has resumed work at 734 developments in all of China as of March 27th, including 424 projects recovering to normal construction levels. Evergrande expressed in a WeChat post that it will, quote, continue to maintain the normal construction of the projects in order to deliver the buildings to the owners with guaranteed quality and quantity at all costs, end quote. In the same post, the company revealed how it and other crisis-hit developers are still managing to stand on 2 feet, for now at least, expressing thanks to their, quote, strong support from the provincial government, end quote. Hey guys, I'd love to hear what you thought about some of the updates we covered in today's episode, so throw your comments below. Always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.